Welcome to Currently, a weekly news roundup featuring conversations about some of the top local stories from the past 7 days from the journalists who are covering them. I'm your host, Crystal Frost. Now, this podcast was recorded at 5:30 p.m. on Thursday, March 20th, so things may change by the time you're watching or listening. Currently is made possible by underwriting from our generous lead supporter, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings, located on South Garfield Avenue in Traverse City. It's home fashion elevated. Support also comes from West Shore Bank. When you choose West Shore Bank, you're not just choosing a bank, you're choosing a partner committed to the well-being of your community. Visit them today on 8th Street or at westshorebank.com. And finally, from the Coin Slot Arcade Bar in Traverse City. It's a chill hangout boasting a full bar of 200-plus rotating cans, drafts, shooters, and, of course, pinball machines in a low-key setting. Joining me in the studio today, as always, is head writer of the Traverse City Ticker, Ms. Beth Milligan.
Hello.
Hello. And joining me, us, once again, our friend and media master, the editor of the Glen Arbor Sun, Mr. Jakob Wheeler.
Hi.
Hi. How are you guys?
I'm great.
You're great?
Great. Happy spring.
Happy
Sunshine. It was a snow day today for the first day of spring, which feels appropriate for Northern Michigan, but the sun is out this afternoon. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Sun's out, guns out. That's
Yes.
what we say, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's a very 90s reference. Thank you for getting it. Also want to say big thank you to you, Beth. Last week you were in the big chair filling in for me because, I had a little bit of surgery.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit of surgery, but I'm back and I'm so happy to be here with both of you. Jakob, what's new in your world for the first day of spring?
Welcome back. My family and I were going to the Carolinas for spring break next week. So going to have some good Southern food, check out Asheville, check out Clemson, new places for me.
Oh, I love that. Are you going to fly or drive?
Fly and then rent a car and drive.
Nice, both. You got to do it both ways. I love it. So as a reminder, we want to tell people how they can find you. So the Ticker is a free multimedia daily news email and website. You can subscribe and it'll come directly into your inbox. You don't even have to look for it. Just do that at traverseticker.com. I love that. Easy peasy, right? And the Glen Arbor Sun is a free newspaper that covers Leelanau County events, characters, businesses, and the arts. You publish 17 print editions a year, every other week during the summer and monthly during the fall, winter, and spring. Plus, you can find it online, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is glenarborsun.com?
That's right.
I did it. Look at that. Well, Jakob, we're going to start with you. And the last time you were here, we were talking a little bit about some of, the changes, a lot of them due to the Department of Government efficiency and some of the cuts and things like that were happening locally. But we're going to start about talk about a story that you were starting to cover even back then. Mm. And you put this out in your March edition. This is about the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, in particular about how things might change for visitors for the upcoming season. So can you first of all give us an idea of what happened? I mean, this all comes from really federal cuts, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, Elon Musk's department in the Trump administration has, this has gotten a lot of publicity, nationwide, but massive cuts, thousands of federal employees, national park officials. And the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore has suffered a few of these cuts to permanent positions, year-round positions, including one person who actually moved here for a job that she was about to begin, and then the job was yanked out from under her. But in the case of Sleeping Bear Dunes, what may well prove to be just as or even more impactful is our national lakeshore, 30-some miles of coastline, Benzie County, Leelanau County, relies heavily on the over 100, or at least approximately 100, seasonal employees who are brought aboard for the high season. Perhaps 2/3 of the national park staff, people in uniform we see in July, are seasonal workers. They're temporarily. Typically, they're recruited, hired in the dead of winter when things seem very quiet to the rest of us, December, January, February. Onboarded, they have to go through government background checks and all this because they're government employees, and to begin working in, depending on what their role is, April or May or June when all the tourists arrive. But because of the federal spending freeze and the cuts and the threats of more and the uncertainty surrounding all this coming from Washington and the inability of national park staff to talk to any of us press. I mean, they've got a gag order. That process was ground to a halt, and in some sense, the hiring of seasonals has reopened, but very, very slowly. And so now, Sleeping Bear Dunes is trying to hire these 100 or so seasonal workers starting in March now, but typically they're receiving their job offers now or soon. It's a question whether they'll be able to come here. Also, many, it takes them a long time. They come from outside the area. It takes them a long time to find housing.
Yeah.
As of a week ago, when I published my most recent edition, what I learned was that of the 100 or so seasonal positions, Sleeping Bear Dunes had hired only 20%. 80% are unfilled because it's so late in the game to hire them, and moving here at the drop of a dime, and also having to trust the government that had let you down if you're one of these people who were hoping for a position before. They're not being able to hire them. I have heard that in the last week they've been able to hire a bit more than that 20%. Perhaps some of those to monitor the piping plover, which is this endangered species that's been really a success story to bring it back to Sleeping Bear Dunes on its migratory route. But the latest I've heard is fee collectors still have not been hired. Rangers, people picking up trash at the dune climb still haven't been hired. And so, the headline in my most recent edition, your Sleeping Bear Dunes experience this year may feel very different. People who are coming in July and August, we get 1.6 million or so visitors per year. Their experience may be very different in terms of places in the park that are not open to them, overflowing trash bins, rangers keeping them safe if someone decides to hike out to the from the dune climb to the lake on a very, very hot day.
Oh, yeah.
It could be a very different experience.
Right. You mentioned the piping plover there, and I want to say, I think some people have this idea, first of all, that these part-time workers that you're talking about, that maybe they're more local people who just take it as a part-time job, and there might be a few of them, but they are people who come to the area for the most part, and they have maybe some specialty in a certain field when they're coming to this area as well. And you mentioned, some very, very important things like fee collections and picking up trash. Of course, very important. But this piping plover population relies really solely on human park staff for protection. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works and, about how they've been able to really help this migrating bird over the last few years and what this year might be? It could be the demise of this bird population.
There have been some suggestions in the media that they could be really at risk. My understanding is there are 9 to 12 spots in Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore where the migratory piping plover, which were endangered, land when they come through this area. So typically what happens is the national park staff and some volunteers devoted to helping the piping plover, they rope off sections of the dunes or the dune grass where people are not supposed to go. Our animals, our dogs, which we should have them on leashes, are not supposed to go to protect the piping plover.
Yeah.
And so there's this real fear that they'll be hurt if they come this year. When they come, the piping plover are coming regardless.
Yeah.
Doge doesn't have any. Doge is not spending. It's not cutting spending for the bird themselves. What's been interesting, I've learned really within the last 24, 48 hours that there are some volunteers, some just local citizens who are gathering, who are trying to recruit, and I'll be publishing a story about this at some point soon, who are trying to recruit volunteers who don't have a specialty but are just willing to go out there and do the legwork of taping off sections and looking for the piping plover once they begin to arrive in early to mid-April.
And, I was going to say, I think a lot of national reporting has kind of established that how hasty a lot of these federal cuts have been means that we don't actually understand sometimes the importance of the positions that have been cut or what the impacts will be when they're gone. And I think we're going to see that this year as those actually play out, whether it's at Sleeping Bear or VA offices or wherever, Social Security offices, wherever the case may be. In this case, I would say, you hinted at it, and I was going to say too, just a plug for people who love Sleeping Bear. If you're going there this year, one, take it easy on the staff if they're struggling because they're understaffed. But two, just things that we can do as park visitors, whether it is keeping dogs on leashes, especially with the piping plovers, or making sure you hike your trash out. Give an extra donation if you can, even if there's not someone there collecting fee. They usually have donation boxes, or you can donate online. I think just those things that we can do as ourselves as park visitors and enjoyers will maybe help a little bit. Hopefully we'll see some of this funding restored or these positions restored, because I think they are important. But in the meantime, there are things we can do to support the parks as well.
Yeah.
I was reminded in a conversation last night with one of these people who were trying to organize Piping Plover volunteers, I'd forgotten about this, that, in the depths of COVID in 2020, when Sleeping Bear Dunes closed down, technically, but of course we could still go there and hike and seek solace. Volunteers were going and emptying the trash bins on their own accord. And we might, be in a situation where that's necessary again.
Yeah. And it's good to know that there are people that love our National Lakeshore that much that they're willing to go and do it on their own. I do want to talk a little more about the people that you were able to speak with, though. You did speak with a few former park staff. And what was most surprising to you about those conversations?
Yeah, key sources for me and for other media reporting on this have been Tom Ulrich, who lives in the area. He's a former deputy superintendent, so second in command up until the fall of 2023, so up until quite recently. Being retired, he's able to speak freely. But he's an incredible resource because as a deputy superintendent for decades, or at least having worked for the park for decades, he understands the inner workings of the park, of Sleeping Bear Dunes and other parks, but he also understands the inner workings of the hiring process and how many seasonalists and how many permanents. So he's been a great resource for me in that, the current superintendent of Sleeping Bear, Scott Tucker, is gagged. He can't talk to me. Can't talk to press. Also, Sue Jennings, a retired wildlife biologist, I believe. She's been an incredible resource. And again, knowing the inner workings of the park, she has decades of experience under her belt, but can speak freely, and can speak without fear of retribution.
Right.
Which no park staff currently, will speak to me.
I know some of these. This has been rescinded of recent, but I feel like you hinted on this, Jakob, in that people are less likely to trust a government position after some of the things that have happened. So you might have someone who was in line for, say, a park ranger position or something else, maybe even a biologist position. And after all the tumult of what has happened in the last, really 60 days, people might be shying away from that. I mean, is there a fear that, even when after, this administration, whether or not things change or not, that you might have fewer people wanting to get into government service, period?
Absolutely a fear. And what Sue and Tom, who again are retired park employees, and what Julia Gehring, who spoke to me on record for my story, her position was cut on Valentine's Day, and then another key source for me was someone who had a job with Sleeping Bear and was let go, but she did not feel comfortable speaking with me on the record for fear of political and otherwise retribution. Yeah, they're very worried that people won't work for the park.
Right.
They talked to me about how, the pay is not always great. It would be better in the private sector, but they've done this work because they love it.
Yeah.
They love, pulling people out of a campsite in a dangerous situation and then 2 hours later giving a young child a ranger badge.
Yeah.
I think one of the quotes was they work for the sunsets.
They get paid in sunsets.
They get paid
yeah.
in sunsets.
I love that quote.
Great quote.
Yeah. So not only might future would-be park staff dissuaded from doing this important, though not always lucrative work, but we're potentially losing institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
As people are pushed out, not in the national park, but also all other levels of government.
Yeah, and I think you have to think about the cultural messaging that's happening along with these cuts, which is a communication to the public that these are unnecessary, bloated positions, bureaucrats who aren't contributing to society, who, are inefficient, and that's why they're being eliminated. And that messaging was given personally to many employees who were terminated, saying that they were terminated because their contributions weren't needed, or they were found to have been performing badly, even though many of them had excellent performance reviews. So I think that messaging not only directly to employees, but to the public about the value of these employees is very damaging. And I think that also will take a long time to recover when you've communicated that public servants are somehow now being villainized for their service and taking lower paying jobs in the private sector because they care so much about working for parks or the country or the VA or whatever it is. That messaging, I think, is a little more nuanced, but is being internalized by a lot of people in the country. And that can maybe take a longer time to undo.
Yeah. Well said.
A fear that I heard, speaking on the macro level, which really stuck with me, was a former ranger also talked about how, one of the worst case scenarios long term is that, let's say our national park, other national parks have a rough experience this summer and people are disappointed, trash bins overflowing, et cetera, and suddenly the powers that be in the future determine, well, these parks can't handle the work, and then they privatize services. And then we lose what, we've always called America's best idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Parks Department. And again, and we're going to talk about this in a second story too. I mean, just about some of these federal departments that are heavily, both sides of the aisle love these parks, right? This is not usually something that is politicized. So before we move on to that story, though, Jakob, I have to ask you, this is more than just the hiring, though. I was reading about credit cards being frozen so they can't buy toilet paper or trash bin materials, that kind of stuff.
As of a week ago, as I understand it, National Park staff, Sleeping Bear Dunes staff, who receive orders initially from the regional office in Omaha, their debit cards or credit cards, their federal employees have been frozen, so they can't make purchases more than $1.
More than $1.
More than $1.
Oh wow!
And the one person in Omaha who had the ability to supersede that and grant some kind of purchase, there was one person for the whole region.
Oh wow!
So no purchase, no more than $1. So my understanding is they can't buy toilet paper. And in the case of rangers, they can't buy ammunition. There's a million things they can't buy right now.
Wow.
So they're not ready for everyone to arrive in June or July.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And that's usually May, June, July. You're talking May, June, July, August, right? That's the big bulk of summer. Wow. Well, let's move to our second story. Beth, this week you covered a story about how the Traverse Area District Library is dealing with the loss of the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences. Now, thank you for your coverage on this because I had no idea that this existed. It's the only federal agency that is dedicated to funding libraries. And this is, again, continuing that conversation about what does this mean for TADL, the Traverse Area District Library's main branch on Woodmere, and it has 5 satellite locations as well. What does this mean?
Yeah, so this executive order was affected several agencies on Friday from the Trump administration. It also, I just mentioned, like in the story, the Council on Homelessness, the Agency for Global Media, which is the parent company of A Voice of America, and I'm sure Jakob would know well that's a very important journalistic outlet. They are often broadcasting into countries that have authoritarian regimes, and sometimes it's the only voice of outside news in those countries. So that is also impacted by this order. But yes, the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This is an independent federal agency. It supports libraries, but also archives, museums. In the story, we talked about Traverse Area District Library, but also as an aside, institutions in Traverse City like the Denos Museum Center also get funding through this agency. So this agency is directing, last year it was $266 million to these institutions. How typically for the library funding in Traverse City works is funding comes to the Library of Michigan, the state library, and then the state library distributes it to the independent libraries throughout the state, including Traverse Area District Library. So where we might see some real impacts from this is MELCAT, which is the statewide interlibrary loan service. About 50 people use this in Traverse City every day to request materials from across the state. So sometimes certain kinds of books or catalogs or testing support might not be available in Traverse City, but they can have it shipped up from Lansing or Detroit or somewhere else where another library in the state has that. That is funded through the IMLS, so that's an example of one. We have other databases. A lot of stipends are given to libraries like TADL's for things like summer reading programs for kids, educational stipends for the staff so they can go to conferences and learn about the latest trends in libraries and bring those things back to Traverse City. So at the time that we're recording this, Traverse Area District Library is having its board meeting, so we'll see how that goes. They're expecting a high turnout today. If they have too much of a turnout, they might have to reschedule it. So we'll have an update. I'll put an update in the show notes tomorrow. on Facebook about this, but they're having a discussion about how to respond to this.
Yeah.
So what that will likely look like is putting out a joint board statement to our legislators, asking them to push back against this cut to the IMLS, and also asking if that federal funding is gone to boost Michigan's own budget this year for libraries in the state to help make up the shortfall.
Wow. I mean, this is big news. And, it kind of makes me think about libraries and national parks and other, these are the kind of federal funding that is pretty minuscule, first of all, when you look at the overall budget of the federal government. And libraries is about 0.003% that you write about. Over 1.2 billion visits to libraries happen across the country every year. So any business-minded individual would look at this as going, if you see an investment of $322 million in total spending and that return on investment resulting in billions of visits, I mean, that's a great use of dollars in my mind. And I feel like most people would agree. So whether you're in favor of federal cuts or not, when you have federal programs that are bipartisan supported, that have great ROI, like the libraries, like the national parks, I feel like this is just we're putting ourselves at risk of public relations disasters, as I think we've seen.
Yeah, and I think I think polling supports that. I think they're nationally, if you look at national polls, I think the support for Doge is decreasing, support for Elon Musk is decreasing. I think in part it's not, and I think, people on both sides of the aisle agree, it's not that there's not inefficiency or even perhaps fraud in areas of government that
Absolutely.
could be investigated or eliminated. I think it's the haste with which so many programs, including beloved programs like libraries, are being rapidly defunded. And it makes it, the New York Times, for example, has done a lot of great reporting on this, but it makes it look like there's not careful analysis happening. The haste is what is causing a lot of concern. Mm-hmm. And I would say libraries are an example for sure. You mentioned the word bipartisan. Particularly in rural areas, libraries provide many services that community members need. And, another example for our local Traverse area district library is the Larry Gorton Talking Book Library, which is... It won a Library of Congress award last year, wow. A national award. It provides free audio and Braille materials to about 400 people across our community who are either reading impaired or physically impaired, have some sort of disability where they can't look at traditional visual reading materials. So these are alternate materials for them. About half of the funding for that program comes from national grants. So that's another one. When I talked to Michelle Howard, the library director, there's a lot of fear about how devastating that would be for people of all political stripes in the community who use that resource at the library.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a very well done story, and we're really anxious to hear about what happens at the meeting.
Yes, we'll have an update
now. Obviously, in the meeting as well, they're going to be addressing another item here. The library board is weighing a patron request to ban a book that is currently available at the library. And you wrote about this in your story as well. It got lots of attention. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, and this is the reason why I think today, in addition to the library funding, when we're done recording today, I'm going to pop over to the library and see how this meeting is going. Because I know that the board has gotten many, many, many emails about this issue this week. This is the first time in any staff's memory at the library that a book banning request has been elevated to the board level. So Tattle, like many libraries, does have a process to challenge materials in the library. A patron can fill out a form expressing their concerns. That form goes to a committee that includes the library director and 2 library department heads. They review the request with the patron, and then they make a decision. Typically, there's about only one of those requests per year. Often the library will turn down the request, in part because they have very stringent vetting processes for materials to even be introduced into a collection in the first place. So by the time a book makes it to a library shelf, the librarians have looked at professional publishing reviews for that book. They've looked at the author's history. They've looked at circulation data. They look at a lot of aspects, and then they put that on the shelf. So they typically won't overturn that, in part also because of their commitment to the First Amendment and free speech rights and families having access to different types of materials. However, if the committee's decision is not one that the patron agrees with, they can appeal to the Board of Trustees.
Okay.
That is what has happened with this book. This book is called Granddad's Pride. It's a children's book by an award-winning author, Harry Woodgate, and it is about a child who helps their grandfather start a pride parade in their hometown. So we have seen in recent years that LGBTQ plus books are in a category that are often being now politically challenged for book bans. That's quite common. And unfortunately, it's an issue here in our community as well. And I think, what was interesting about this conversation is there's a really fundamental free speech right issue here. When I talked to Michelle Howard, the library director, she did acknowledge, and I think this is important for folks to know, that not all library materials are appropriate for all ages.
Right.
So there very well may be material in the library that's not appropriate for a child. However, the library policy is that discretion is left up to parents. So if there are patrons who are under 18, parents have the right and duty under Tattle's policy to monitor that content for those underage patrons.
Right.
And her quote in the story that I think is an important one to keep in mind when we have these book banning discussions is she said, "We respect a parent's right to choose what their children read, but they can't choose what someone else's children read." And I think that is the fundamental First Amendment right issue that's at the heart of this TCAPS debate or Tattle debate this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that. As of the time that we're recording this, you mentioned before recording that lots of people are emailing, lots of people are, have things to say about this. Most of it in favor of keep the book and let people decide for themselves or for their children.
Yes. And, the ACLU Michigan has weighed in on this issue. Friends of Tattle have weighed in, the League of Women Voters of the Grand Traverse area, all in support of keeping the book in circulation. For that reason, some people may not want their children to have access to pride materials, but other families have gay parents or have, that access to learning about pride is really important for them.
Yeah.
So, we'll, again, because the meeting's happening right now, we don't know the outcome of that, but we will certainly share an update on that.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Beth, has this book faced bans or hurdles elsewhere?
It has, yes. And I think, what we're also seeing, and the reason TCAP slipped into my mind along with Tattle is, that these conversations also happen at school board levels for school libraries quite frequently. And we have seen in recent years that there are some concerted efforts on the right to put together lists of books that they recommend that, people go in their communities and challenge these books. Sometimes people haven't even read them. Sometimes they have. But they kind of will put out materials recommending if your library carries this book, you should go and challenge it. In this case, I will just note that when a committee at the library gets a challenge book, they are all required themselves. They all read it before they make a decision about it. They can talk about the imagery with the person. And Michelle did say traditionally, when they explain to a patron, this is why we are keeping the book in circulation and turning down your request, and they'll go through the rationale. Most people do usually accept that in the end.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, coming up, we're going to hear about a Northport couple who are honoring their grandson in a very unique way. Plus, Beth will give us the latest restaurant and retail roundup. But first, a word for our lead supporter, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings. Now, a few years ago, my grandpa gifted me a kitchen hutch that belonged to my great-great-grandmother. It's a beautiful piece. It's lasted for literal generations. It was even the first piece that was rescued during a house fire that my great-grandparents had in the 1950s. So it's got a story. And every time I look at it, I think of it displayed in my grandparents' home. I think of my grandma putting the dishes into the hutch. And I think about how it probably was displayed in my great-grandparents' home. It's a special piece. And what makes it most special is that it's 100% hardwood. So it lasts. So when you're looking for furniture that's going to last, the furniture that will become an heirloom for future generations, look no further than Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings. Now, they carry the best hardwood furniture in the North, from beautiful dining room tables and chairs to bedroom furniture and even home office furniture. Plus, right now, it's all on sale. So if that's important to you, it's happening right now. And an extra 10% off already great prices. It's all a part of the March hardwood sale at Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings. Buy something solid that you will enjoy for your lifetime and that your family will keep for generations to come. Head to Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings on South Garfield Avenue in Traverse City. It's home fashion elevated. And welcome back to Currently. Now, our third story, Jakob, is just one that I found to be like deeply lovely. Mm-hmm. I loved it. One of your writers covered a story about a Northport couple who found a really sweet way to honor their late grandson. And I just want you to take it away and tell us all about it.
I mean, we need uplifting good news.
Oh, we really do.
We've got to, Ross Boyson, one of my stalwart writers who writes for other publications, The Ticker as well, once in a while, wrote a piece that we published. Jim and Jan Brown, an elderly couple, I believe, in their 80s, who live on some acreage near Northport. March is maple. It's the season for tapping maple trees. Mm-hmm. Boiling it down takes quite a process, but making your homemade maple syrup is special around here. So Jim and Jan have been making Pa Brown's maple syrup since 2009. In 2010, they lost their grandson, Rance, to cancer. And that was kind of one of the impetus for making Pa Brown's maple syrup. Proceeds of which from sales they send to St. Jude's Children's Hospital to help the next child battling cancer.
Yeah, it's just, and they continue to do this, right? It's fantastic. So it's called Pa Brown's maple syrup. Have you ever tapped maple syrup? Have you ever done that?
When I was little, and I grew up out near Empire, my parents lived on a dirt road. The school bus, Glen Lake School at that time, would drop my sister and off 3/4 of a mile down a dirt road from home. We would walk home down the dirt road in March or April, and we would dip our fingers. So we're tired at the end of the day, 4:00, whatever. We dip our fingers in the sap bucket.
Yep.
Just to taste that bit of sweetness.
I mean, I'll give a plug to the NMC Extended Education Program, which is just, if you ever just want to take a class of something that interests you in the community, you don't have to go get a degree. You can just take a one-off class for an afternoon. I, a couple years ago, went through their naturalist program and got my certificate doing that, which is a lot of different outdoor classes. And one of them was maple syrup tapping at the Grass River Natural Area out by Bel Air. And it's free. I recommend, if you just want to learn how to do it, once you know how to do it, there's so many maples, people often have them on their property. Yeah. And it's a really fun process to do.
My grandparents used to do it every year. And so they would tap and then they would be boiling on the stove. And it was just always a process. And I never learned how to do it. So really exciting. Maybe I'll take that class. Yeah.
But boil down the sap outside.
Oh, yeah. It's
I have
supposed
some
to be.
Minnesota friends when I lived in Minneapolis, and they once boiled the sap on their kitchen stove.
Yeah.
What do you think the ceiling looked like?
Not great.
Sticky mess.
Not great. Well, this is such a beautiful story that Ross wrote, and just a lovely story about this couple and how they wanted to honor their grandson, how they wanted to raise money for St. Jude's, which is an amazing, amazing hospital that's doing lots of cancer research on cancers that are so rare that you're not going to have lots of, other maybe pharmaceutical companies that are going to cover this. It's just fantastic. I was reading here that they did buckets on 180 trees. And then now there are over 300 trees. That's a lot of trees.
The fact in the article that they said they've donated nearly 70,000, I thought, for sure it might be a smaller number, but it's just like a feel-good story about a couple. That's a real impact. That's a lot of money to raise.
70,000.
It's hard work. And he's over 87 years old, which is incredible. That's so inspiring.
Better. Oh my gosh. I love this story, and you have to read all about it. GlenArborSun.com. It's so great. You can pick it up in Leelanau County, or you can just go online, GlenArborSun.com. For our final story, Beth, it's one of my favorite features that you do at the Ticker. I love it, love it, love it. It is the Retail and Restaurant Roundup. You do these every few weeks, really, and you tell us about businesses that are coming to the area, maybe businesses that are sadly closing for whatever reason. And then you also tell us about those that might be upgrading or expanding services. And you had a roundup story this week, so I was super excited to hear all about it. Let's dive in.
Yeah, these are one of my favorite stories to write too, and they are one of the most popular stories on the Ticker because you kind of have just one spot where it's like everything you're sort of wondering about new restaurant, retail stores, whatever it might be, is in one spot. We try to get a good compilation every month or so. So there's a lot happening in downtown Traverse City right now. That's where a lot of these most recent updates are taking place. So right near the studio here downtown on Front Street, Zips Harley Davidson, which closed recently, is going to be the home of a new boutique called Hello Friends Boutique. That is going to be opening in early May. It's honestly an interesting and inspiring story. Is that a couple, Heather and Eddie Nickerson, who during the pandemic started, this small business online only, doing these like live pop-up events where on social media they would sell clothes and then they'd ship them or have them come pick them up out of their
I
their
watched
home.
these. Yes. Oh, yeah.
So they have grown now. They have over 10,000 followers now for these shopping events. And so now they'll continue doing those because they have such a following for them, but they will have this downtown boutique. It's interesting and a little bit unique for Hello Friends is that they're really focused on size inclusivity. So they have small all the way up to 3XL. Plus shoes, accessories, jewelry. So, people maybe who shopping at traditional stores have a difficult time finding their sizes. They really have an emphasis on wanting everyone of every size to feel comfortable and beautiful. So they have a wide range of clothing that you can try on. So that'll be early May.
Yeah.
And then the other one that we were kind of, there's a lot in downtown happening, but on the other end of Front Street, a lot of folks know, of course, Little Beau, a longtime institution that in 2021 was taken over by a new group of family owners, multiple family members, Jenny Scott being kind of the head over there. So right next door, where Front Street Liquor used to be, they have bought that building. In part because Little Beau's has such a tiny kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
That they wanted a larger kitchen for Little Beau. But also they're going to be opening a new breakfast and lunch spot called Sisters.
Oh, good. We need more breakfast and lunch.
We have some great brunch spots in town, but especially in the summer, they are often packed and you can have, an hour plus wait. So in mid-April, they're hoping to open this Sisters restaurant. They will have classic kind of brunch, eggs Benedict, that kind of thing, a full bar. But the idea is, they'll be open there at Sisters from 8 to 2 every day. They'll close in the evening when Little Beau is still open. But then in the evenings in Sisters, they can have private parties and events and catering so they can kind of expand the business overall.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Anything else?
Yeah. So a few more quick ones I'll mention. Relish in the Warehouse District, a really popular clothing store. Tracy Lark is closing that store at the end of April. However, she has been hinting that she is going to be rebranding the business to something different. So
better be.
She's going to, I know, Relish is a great store. I shop there often. So she's got kind of a next chapter that we'll see. She's hinting something will be coming. And then we should also mention, if we want to get out of downtown a little bit, over in Kids Creek Marketplace, which is on US 31 as you're heading over to Meyer there, where Little Caesars is, there's a new Thai restaurant, Thai A Go-Go. And if you are a Thai kitchen fan, this is a sister restaurant to Thai Kitchen. They want to kind of get something on the west side of town. So they have, curries, noodle dishes, pad Thai, that kind of thing. But they've been open a few weeks there, and I've been hearing really great reviews about that. So if you're a Thai food fan, Thai A Go-Go is open now.
Oh, that is fantastic. I love these. I love those roundup stories. And, it's sad to see and hear about businesses that are like maybe closing, but it's really nice to hear about ones that are.
Yes. And we've got KFC, Big Lots, Joann Fabrics, Macy's, all closing. So there are some closures in there. But it's good to know if your favorite business is winding down, maybe you can still go and support them and get some sales at the end. And then definitely plenty of new ones coming online as well.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Beth. And thank you so much to our guest journalists, Beth Milligan, head writer for the Traverse City Ticker, and Jakob Wheeler, editor of the Glen Arbor Sun. We are going to be back next Friday with a pared down spring break version of Currently, because it's just me and Beth in town. Everybody else is gone.
We'll just be drinking margaritas on the show and
a little beach umbrella somewhere warm, including you, Jakob. So be sure to subscribe to the show on all platforms at crystalfrost.com. You can follow us on social media and subscribe to Currently with Crystal Frost wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch the full show on YouTube and Facebook. Currently is a Compass Local podcast. It's produced by Pancake Boy Productions. And big thanks to our lead sponsor, Golden-Fowler Home Furnishings, in addition to our wonderful supporters, West Shore Bank and the Coin Slot. Now, speaking of the Coin Slot, Jakob, last time you did pretty well. You ready to up your skills in pinball?
Oh, yeah.
All right, guys, I completely forgot to ask you what you're looking forward to most for the coming week. So this is going to be our free play question. What are you looking forward to?
So you and I have a connection to the documentary film Marquee Town, which our partners worked on.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. So there's going to be a free screening at the Peninsula Public Library on Old Mission Thursday at 6:30 p.m. I will be there.
Ooh.
We'll be doing an audience Q&A, and so you can come see it for free.
How about you, Jakob?
I'm looking forward to ribs and other barbecued meats in the Carolinas, where my family and I are going next week, Saturday to Saturday.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing about it. Well, I have to say I'm most looking forward to Marquee-Town, too. So not to, completely steal your thunder.
That'll also be the opening day of baseball, too, which we love. We're Tigers fans, so we'll have both, yeah.
Go Cubs.
And go Cubbies.
Marquee-Town is a great movie.
Yeah, it
Props
is.
to all those behind it.
It's pretty good. I mean, I still like it, even though I've seen it like 20 times, right?
Like it 22.
So watch it 22 times.